All right. So we have two guests today. We have a face that I think a lot of Philadelphia Union folks will recognize in terms of Amobi Okugo, which I'm so glad to have him, having watched him from section 140 or 130, whatever it was, many, many years ago. But also another special guest who sort of prompted the whole conversation that I wanted to have today in terms of Tesho, and I hope I'm saying this right, Tesho Akindele, who has represented Canada internationally as well as Orlando and Dallas, correct?
Yep,
So
that's right.
I want to turn it over to you, Tesha, if you just want to do a quick introduction. I don't want to say flash your credentials. Everybody should know who you are considering how long you played, but if you want to just chat a little bit.
Yeah, so I got drafted in 2014, so I'm best known as being drafted the same year as Andre Blake, I guess. All the Philly fans would know that. But no, I played 9 years in the league, had a great time. I won an Open Cup with Dallas, won an Open Cup with Orlando, Supporter Shield with Dallas, so had some success. Played with the Canadian national team, and then just recently retired and now work for a real estate developer, which I'm really loving this kind of round two of my life right now, but still have a nice soft spot obviously for soccer. And I think now I can be a little bit more free flowing with my thoughts than I could have been before while I was playing. So, that's why the tweet that maybe made you reach out to me and stuff like that, something I might not have said before, but now just trying to shed a light on some things.
It's awesome how not being employed by MLS or a soccer team sort of lets your tongue loose a little bit more, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But and I want to be clear, like especially at the beginning, I have a ton of respect for MLS, and also like they gave me a career. Like I got paid very well for a long time. Love MLS, but I think there's like some things, like especially from the player's point of view, like what is life like as a soccer player that a lot of fans I think are missing. So hopefully I can shed some light on that in some ways.
Yeah, and that's just it, right? And Amobi Okugo, who also joins us, was part of the union organization for the very early part of it. So Amobi, I'll turn it over to you for a quick introduction.
Yeah, first generation Nigerian American, grew up playing soccer and basketball. Obviously, soccer took over. We had the fortunate pleasure of being the second ever pick to the Philadelphia Union. And yeah, me and Philly, that's where I grew up. I came to Philadelphia as a boy and left as a man. Very fortunate and very thankful, very grateful for my time there. It was the start of my career, and it springboarded me to many other things, not only on the soccer field but off the soccer field as well. Still have ties to Philly, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Since then, went on to play 12 years total, 9 in MLS and then 3 USL. Just recently, I keep saying recently, but it's like been 2 years now. So retired 2 years ago, and now I do a number of different things, mainly entrepreneurship around sports business.
That's awesome. And I appreciate both of you sort of chiming in and letting people know in case they don't recognize you. And Tesha, you alluded to sort of the what led to me reaching out to you in this conversation and your tweet. And I'll try to flash it on the screen or I'll mention it or post the picture. But you had sort of posted something that was intriguing to me, and I wanted to learn more, which um, as folks who follow my reporting or my work for covering the Philadelphia Union, I'm sort of a nut for learning about the CBA and the business side of things, as well as wanting to give a voice to the personal side that we don't often see, right? We as fans and as press too, which I wear two hats from time to time, often look forward to the end of season, hopefully with a trophy at hand, but look forward to what are the roster decisions, right? We're often pressing F5 on our computers, or just dragging down on Twitter to see if the admins finally posted the link to see what happens. But I don't think that folks really realize the emotional or the personal side behind someone who doesn't have their contract option picked up, or the contract runs out and it says something along the lines of like we're in constant negotiate or we're in current negotiations with the player, when in reality folks don't really know what that means or what that feels like. And I think that's where I wanted to bring both of you in. Amobi, you as a Philadelphia, a previously employed person by MLS, obviously, but Philadelphia representing them on the field, and Tesha, you as sort of like what started this whole thought train for me. So I guess what I where I wanted to start was, my gosh, there are many ways where we could start in terms of this conversation, but I guess where I want to go from here is your thoughts on your path, right? I think both of you drafted, both of you done your thing. What was that feeling like first in terms of being drafted after? And it's probably timely too, having when we post this, just watched or listened to or read, I guess. They only really show the first round, and the second round is nothing but a press release or like a, draft tracker that you see. But the emotions of being drafted, what were those like for both of you? And maybe we'll start with Tesho.
Yeah, it's funny that you have us both on because we had very different like routes to getting drafted. So I'll start. My story was I went to a Division II school actually in Colorado. I was going to school to be an electrical engineer, and so I was 3.5 years into that, and I ended up getting invited to the combine. I did really well at the combine, but leading up to that, nobody was talking about me because I was from a Division II school. Nobody knew me. Nobody was talking about me. I was Googling my name and stuff. Nothing's popping up. Ended up doing really well at the combine, and but I still didn't know what was going to happen. So the draft was, I think actually that year, 2014, the draft was in Philadelphia, and I didn't go because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get drafted or not. So I went home. I was watching the draft at my college house with my mom, my dad, my friends, and I ended up getting drafted sixth overall to Dallas. So it's just a complete shock for me, a real whirlwind of like a week going from no one's talking about me to the combine went well to getting drafted high. And then so I get a call from Dallas. I got drafted, and then they're like, "All right, you got to be in Dallas in 2 days." So like it's crazy that you go from I didn't know if I was going to get drafted to all right, you need to move to Dallas in 2 days. So that was the start of my journey.
Wait, so you genuinely had no idea? The league didn't like drop any hints or like nothing at all? You literally went in blind.
Went in blind. If I knew I'd get drafted in the first round or the second round even, I would have been in Philadelphia. But I went home because I had no idea, and I didn't want to be there if I wasn't going to get drafted.
Are you then thinking about the Colorado School of the Mines? Are you like one of those obscure stats, right? Like the one and only MLS player ever drafted from the school?
I'm actually the second player ever drafted. The
No
first is a
shit.
guy named, yep, the first is a guy named Craig Thompson. He's a legend. I hung out with him a few times. He'd come back to the school. And so he came in early days of MLS where I think after his first year at DC United, he was doing the numbers and he's like, I might be better off being an engineer than making like 12,000 in the MLS. So he actually made the choice to go into engineering. But yeah, he kind of paved the way, and then I'm the second player from that school.
So I guess going in a different, turning it over to Amobi, but in a different, the other side of the coin, UCLA, a storied background in terms of men's soccer and what they've produced. But Amobi, what was that feeling like to go through the draft?
Yeah, it was a crazy experience. And before I share my story, Tesho, definitely, I would love for you to share your story. I know we talked when we saw each other a couple weeks ago about how you got on the radar with Dallas, like because you scrimmaged the Rapids. So I'm not sure if you're going to touch on that or let me share now. I think that would play a
Okay,
role.
yeah, I'll touch on that.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, when I was in Colorado in the springtime, my school would scrimmage against the Rapids, and so at the time, the coach of the Rapids was Oscar Pareja. And so we scrimmaged the Rapids, and we actually beat them one year. We beat them 4-1 or something like that, or 4-2 maybe. And I scored 2 goals. So, and then we played them a few times though, and I always played well. So I had been seen by Oscar before, but nobody else in MLS had ever seen me because he was coaching the Rapids, and everyone else didn't see Division II players. And then what happened is about a month before the draft, Oscar went from being the coach of the Rapids to being the coach of FC Dallas. So that's
Wow.
why FC Dallas reached for me because Oscar had seen me for a few years playing in Colorado against the Rapids. I had scored against the Rapids as a college player, in spring season. But yeah, so I think he had some insider info a little bit on me as a player.
Is this maybe the reason why we don't see a lot of televised or streamed preseason games from selfishly thinking about the Philadelphia Union, right? They go to Florida and they do their thing, and I'm often just like, okay, admin, post something about this preseason game because I want to know what the hell's going on, and maybe it's reasons like this, right, to find gems like yourself.
Yeah, they're hiding the good talent, the good college players. They don't want the world to know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Amobi, let me return it back to you about your experience with the
No,
draft.
most definitely. And I think the reason why I'm glad Tesho shared that story because you never know when someone's watching. So for me, I had a different kind of pathway. I was, fortunate enough to play for the youth national teams, went to residency, all the way from U14 to Olympic cycle. So I was on the radar, but then I went to UCLA and, freshman had a good year. We went to the Elite Eight. Um, and I was going to the U20 camp after the season, but things just started happening quickly. Like agents were reaching out to my parents. I had, different opportunities to go on trial overseas, and then next thing you know, an agent reached out about the Generation Adidas, and my parents are very big on education, so that was really enticing. And the fact that you get your education subsidized or reimbursed, however you want to look at it, and then you get extra compensation for leaving early because you're still like 2010, 2000 that around that time is still, I mean, it's good money, but it's not where it is now. And it wasn't where it is like way back then. So you had a nice little sweet spot in terms of compensation for leaving early. But the fact that I was Generation Adidas, that really enticed my parents because they're really big on education. And it wasn't like I was planning on going to UCLA for 1 year and then going pro. It just kind of happened. Like if the opportunity presented itself, you strike while the iron's hot, and ended up going to the combine. Like Tesho, I had a pretty good combine. I was kind of projected like late first round, young prospect, but then I got to the combine and just had a great showing. Ended up moving up and then picked with the sixth pick in 2010 to Philadelphia Union.
That's awesome. I guess from here where I want to go is sort of talking about the pieces that again people don't really think about. Tesha, your story is interesting because you were sort of an unknown, right, in terms of your path to the league versus Amobi, who Generation Adidas, which is typically players that are probably going to be surefire bets to make it in the league, if not interest from abroad. That's the way I read it, what a Generation Adidas player is, right? It's a way to, I hate to use the word lock them in, but lock them within the MLS walls, right? Which interestingly enough, a Generation Adidas player today dropped all the way to the 26th pick, which is interesting to me in terms of maybe the depth of the draft this year. Because I would think that those very select players would be towards the top. But Tesho, in terms of your experience, when did an agent come into your life? Because again, you were not expecting to be drafted, let alone be, sticking around as long as you did.
Agents, the first time I talked to an agent was at the combine. So I think I scored in the first day of the combine, and then I get back to the hotel and there's like three dudes there that are like, hey, you want to come talk to me? So all of a sudden they're like, do you have an agent? Do you have an agent? I didn't have an agent. I had never talked to an agent before. So it was at the combine when I first started talking to people. But the agent I ended up going with was this guy named Aaron Maines, and he was part of Wasserman at the time, which Wasserman represents a lot of, especially American players and coaches, I think even too. Wasserman's a pretty big agency.
Mm-hmm.
So it ended up though that my college coach knew the guy because I
Yeah.
was getting at that point, it was a whirlwind. Like I said, I was getting contacted by agents. I was like, what's going to happen now? But luckily, my college coach had known this guy before, and he could vouch for him as a person. But I didn't talk to anybody until I didn't even sign with an agent until after I was drafted too.
Wow. No, and the immediate thought for me was, shit, you're a kid, right? And suddenly you're growing up very, very quickly in the span of two weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I don't know, maybe a little bit longer. But to make some of these financial decisions, I was hopeful that there was some sort of, I don't want to say parent figure, but like some sort of like someone overseeing, right? Someone being the adult in the room, not letting you sign I hate to use this example too, but like student loans, right? How predatory they are, and you sort of fall into this vicious cycle, and you have no idea. You're just excited to be in a college dorm and talk to girls or drink beer or whatever. But like, you hopefully had some protection, and the college coach was that for you. Um, were you both happy? I saw Amobi sort of give people can't see this because he's muted and it didn't flip the camera to him, but he sort of gave like a thumbs up with Wasserman. Were you guys happy with the selection? Did you guys stick around with him for a while? And from maybe folks that you've played with, what leads to the breakup with an agent? Maybe I'll throw it over to you, Amobi.
And so I was giving the thumbs up to Aaron Maines. Aaron Maines is, one of the good guys in the business, especially in the agency world. You hear stories, it's very cutthroat, like how they were waiting for Tesho outside of his hotel. If you're not first, you're last when it comes to the agency world. So in a world where it's like almost like, eat what you kill and sharks, Aaron Maines is one of the good guys. He's no longer an agent, but he's still in the soccer space. And that's why I was giving him a thumbs up. As it pertains to Wasserman, I have a great relationship with Wasserman as well. They're some of the best in the business. It really depends on the profile player that you are to see the benefits of what Wasserman can do. I would suggest to any player, whether you work with a Wasserman or Pro Sport or Rock Nation or whoever it is, find out the needs for you, because Wasserman for me may be different for Wasserman for Tesho, or X agent versus X agent. And it really depends on, what specifically you're looking for, the dynamic. There's so many different factors in choosing an agent and a right agent for you based on you as a player, as a person, that I think gets swept under the rug for a lot of players. And then you see a lot of turnover both on the agency side because maybe their values don't match with the player, and then reverse with the player and the agent because they don't have matching values. But for me, Wasserman's, they're probably some of the best in the business. And then specifically Aaron Maines, you could tell he's done a good job with some of his clientele in the past. He's no longer an agent now.
So Tesho, did you like walk away with like a stack of cards from that combine, from all the agents trying to like get a hold of you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I gave my phone number out to a bunch of them, and then so they were calling me and stuff. But yeah, I ended up going with Aaron. I think too, like when you're picking an agent, you got to go with somebody that just gives you a good vibe, and because an agent, like Amobi said, it is cutthroat, and you kind of have to be like a tough cutthroat salesman type of person to be a good agent. That's not a knock to them, but so it's hard sometimes to tell when you're a young kid, like, is this person being real with me? Are they being disingenuous? So it helps to have somebody who can vouch for them the way that my coach did. And then another thing too is like, what kind of relationship do you want with your agent? Some people, like me at the beginning of my career, I was calling Aaron every month or something like that. Like we would just call, check in. Later on in my career, I had played for some years. I had a kid, a wife. I didn't need to talk to my agent all the time, so I would call my agent like, once a year almost, or like, and then right when the contract is ready to go kind of thing. So, it depends on where you are in your situation, and that, you can find the right agent for you. But I was lucky. I'll shout out my other agent was Spencer Wadsworth, and he was great to me as well, again at Wasserman.
So I should just clarify that this conversation is not sponsored by Wasserman. Everybody listening and watching, this is not a Wasserman production by any means. Though, Tesho, I do want to circle back with you on something that I found interesting, and producer Todd, who's behind the scenes, reminded me to ask you. Amobi talked about his path, right, in terms of UCLA, maybe I don't want to say Division 1, obviously, that goes without saying. Nothing against Division 2, having enjoyed it myself, but your choice of not joining the Rapids Academy, what was that all about?
Yes, it's funny because some people might read stuff that I slighted the Rapids Academy. That's not what happened at all. What happened was the Rapids Academy started when I was like 16 or 17 years old, and you had to pay $5,000 a year or something to play in the Rapids Academy. And at that time, I already knew I was going to the School of Mines. I've known the coach, and I still talk to him all the time since I was 10 years old. It's one of the best engineering schools in the country. I was always good at math and science, so I was like, I know where I'm going to college. I'm going right here, Colorado School of Mines. What would be the point of me paying $5,000 a year to play in the academy? And at that time, also, like half of the good players left the academy, and like let's say half of them stayed behind. Nowadays, I would have made a different decision. I would have had to play in the academy because pretty much all the good players are in the academy. But back then, it was like not so clear that you had to. And so it was just a combination of the cost of it. I knew where I was going to school, and there was still some good players left outside of the academy system at that time.
It's so interesting you mentioned this because I remember we're the same age, and I remember when the Philadelphia Union Academy was sort of growing, right? And before that, it was PA Classics when they were trying to do something different here in Pennsylvania. And then Philadelphia Union and PA Classics had a partnership, and eventually Philadelphia and their academy, now renowned for the talent that they foster or they bring in, whether it's with questionable practices, the type of players that they bring in, or how they get players to come through in terms of, discovery rights or whatever, different story. But it's interesting you mentioned that. I hate to fast forward, but I want to sort of, now that we've talked about your experience with the draft, I want to hear from both of you sort of when does the bell ring in terms of you've signed your contract or what your contract is like and the length. When do conversations start about the next contract? And Tesho, maybe I'll start with you for this one because I don't all we see is the Fabrizio Romanos or the Tom Bogarts of the world who are announcing contracts being signed. But that doesn't mean that they weren't agreed 2-3 weeks ago, just like with the young guy, which is amazing. Amobi, I don't know if you saw this on social media, but Chris Donovan, a young guy who went to Drexel, has been with the Union for a few years. At 11 o'clock at night, maybe midnight, Fabrizio Romano, a guy with 13.1 million followers, is tweeting that Chris Donovan, a kid making $68,000, just re-signed with the Philadelphia Union for 2 years in the middle of the night, just randomly. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, whether it's organic or not, that's a different conversation with what agents can do in terms of that type of information disbursement. But to me, it was kind of like, okay. And they just announced properly the contract today. So obviously it's been finalized, it's been done or in the works for a little bit. But I don't think we realize that as press or maybe as fans. When does that conversation start?
I'll say like if you're balling out, the conversation starts early. Like if you're playing really well, they'll start talking to you. But if you're just doing average or, if you're not doing so well, I think a lot of times you're left in the dark, which can be really scary. So, kind of alluding to my tweet, a lot of the players on the team, if you're just an average guy doing pretty well or wherever you're at on the roster, halfway through the season, you start thinking, all right, am I gonna get my option picked up? And you're feeling that weight kind of building on you personally, like halfway through the season. And there's not a lot that the coach or the GM is going to say to you at that point, at least in my experience. So it can be a long process for some of the players to think about it themselves, but then that communication doesn't really come until the end of the year, right? When it's decision time, like yes or no on the option versus, if you're doing well, sometimes those conversations happen earlier that they're like, hey, let's talk about getting you re-signed here. That's been my experience, at least. I like to hear what Amobi says as well.
You hit the nail on the head. I would say it's like a seesaw. It's all about the balance of leverage. So if you're doing well, that's when you have the most leverage. You want to lock yourself in, depending on your mindset, or you want to let it run out and then figure things out. On the other side, a team might want to lock you in before you are at your highest value, so they don't have to pay top dollar. So it's just like it's a healthy balance. And depending on the mindset you have as an athlete, do I want long-term guaranteed? So I have the stability, and then I can bet against that or leverage against that every time I have a good year. I go in the opposite, like, oh, I want to re-up. I'm outperforming my contract. Or do you want to play it like bet on yourself, and then next thing you know, you get injured in your last deal. Now the team has leverage; they can get you on a discounted rate. So it's that healthy balance where the team, if they see you start to performing well, they might lock you in before they think you can reach your highest point, so they don't have to pay as much. It's a healthy balance, and that's where agents come into play, and that's where you have to have the mindset, but also the understanding with you and your team to figure out the approach you're going to take.
It's interesting you use the phrase bet on yourself, because I think people are very quick to use it or suggest it, right? Like, go and bet yourself, bet on yourself, go prove yourself, do that. But when it comes to actually doing it, I think people don't realize just how difficult that is, right? In terms of like weighing in the opportunity cost. Like, do I bet on myself now, or do I take a guaranteed and hopefully, like you mentioned, I don't get injured? Or to talk about a more recent case, you have a situation like Kai Wagner, who had all of the leverage in the world with Philadelphia and had an incident with Bobby Wood in New England and probably lost all of his leverage because of what happened, in terms of whether he was the perpetrator or just receiving and retaliating with the racial slur. Whatever happened, I don't want to get into it because obviously we don't know the full story. We're never going to know the full story, but sort of losing all of that leverage, right? In terms of now you're suspended for one game to start the season, plus you have this baggage that you're carrying around in terms of reputation, etc., whatever the fans. It's really interesting when it comes to kind of like weighing the options, and maybe that's a perfect example of maybe a contract should have been accepted before getting too far into the season and letting something like that seesaw thousands of dollars that are on the line.
I think Amobi said it well when he mentioned agent. Like that's probably where an agent can help you, is trying to like strategize what's the best thing for me to do here, especially if the team reaches out and they want to renegotiate a deal with you during, like in the middle of your contract. That's when you can really, come up with a strategy of, okay, now is the time, or let it run. And so agents, they've been there, done that many more times than any player has, because they've seen multiple cycles with multiple players, so they can be helpful in that sense.
Yeah. And I guess to maybe shift the conversation a little bit, when you're sitting there now, fast forwarding to whether or not, you're that player, let's say, that is not having those advanced conversations, right? You're literally waiting till, or the team and the GM, whatever, the Ernst Tanners of the world are waiting till the very end because there's no reason to push the conversation forward. And you're going into that last day for your contract option or whatever. Whether it's personal experience from you or personal experience from knowing someone who went through it, what is that feeling like? I'm guessing scary, darkness, sort of like the words that come to mind. Maybe we'll start with Amobi for this one.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough because, as an athlete, you want stability. Like at the end of the day, you want stability, and whether that's come from, you're playing well or you have guaranteed years, whatever. So when you come to the end of your contract, and it's an option year, or you might be a free agent, and your agent, doesn't have as much information as you'd like, that plays a role. If you have a family, your family's asking you, where are we staying here next year? Like if you have kids, like we got to start looking at different schools. How can you look at schools when you don't know where you're going to go? So that all plays a role into, you know, the ability to perform on the field. So it's a bit of cat and mouse because you don't want to overplay your hand, because if you show desperation, that's leverage against you. You don't want to be seen as too needy in a sense, but you still have to know. So it's a bit of cat and mouse, good cop, bad cop. You got your agent doing, groundwork across other options, different leagues, different teams. What does that look like? And then you try to figure out what it looks like from your angle. But I think the biggest thing that you can do as a player is perform. Perform. And if you can't perform, find ways to be of value. So, are you a good locker room guy? One thing I recommend to any player: be bilingual, because you're a connector, you're a bridge in the locker room. Be a good team guy. Be someone, if you're not a starter, if you're someone that comes in late, you lock shit down. Like as a D mid, I didn't start all the time, but sometimes when I was a late sub, it's like, all right, I'm coming in, lock stuff down. So you got to find ways to provide value outside of just, oh, you're the main guy on the team, because there's only so many spots on a roster. And as we see now, the DPs and the TAMs and the GAMs and the AMs and all the other stuff, they take precedent.
The monopoly money, right? That's what takes precedent now. Tesha, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that specific topic.
Yeah, Moby nailed it by saying like the better you perform, or the more you're adding to the team in whichever way possible, the better it is for yourself. I think like, so I'll take it in the direction of telling a story basically, which is, let's say from the Philadelphia Union's point of view, where they had a great season, they play Cincinnati, right? And they lost to Cincinnati this year, right? So you're out of the playoffs. After that, you're going to go home. The coach will say, all right, we'll talk to you in 2 days. So in 2 days, they say, end of the season meeting is 2 weeks away. So if you have a guaranteed contract, you're fine. You're not worried about what the end of the season meeting is going to say. If you have an option or you're out of contract, you may not know what's going to happen. So then you're waiting for 2 weeks, right? The day comes, 2 weeks, they say, all right, Tesho, meeting's at 2 o'clock. So I say goodbye to my wife and kids in the morning, and I don't know what's going to happen that night or what's going to happen that day. So I drive to the facility, you get there, and your meeting's supposed to be at 2 o'clock, but then there's a line of 10 people in front of you. So it's not really going to be at 2 o'clock. It's going to be at 4:30. So you're there at 1:45, and really your meeting's not going to be till 4:30. And so you're sitting in the facility with all of your teammates, and everybody's trying to be normal selves, laughing, joking, but there's this energy and tension because a lot of people are on options, and like, half of the people in that room that are your boys that you've been in the fight with the whole year are going to get cut, and you're not going to play with them ever again. And you guys are all there waiting for like 2 hours, and then they say, all right, Amobi, your turn, come talk to the coaches. And he has his meeting, boom, out the back door. Like, everybody's whispering, what happened with Amobi? Do you know what happened with Amobi? And then somebody finds out what happened with Amobi. Oh, he got a new contract. Yes, everyone's happy, or he got let go. That's unfortunate. So finally it gets to your turn. Your meeting's supposed to be at 2. Now it's 4:30. You finally get your turn, and you have your conversation. And I luckily in my career only had my option decline one time, which is the very last year of my career. But I was nervous every year, man. I was really nervous. Even years that I played really well, just that uncertainty. Even when I was like, I'm 95% sure they're going to pick up my option, that 5% can feel real heavy on the day when you're sitting in there for a couple hours, So I hope that painted a decent picture of kind of like the experience from the end of the season until a couple weeks later when you might find out what happens with your option or your contract.
Amobi, did this ring true for you at the Philadelphia Union? I frankly can't recall what your contract situations were like. I apologize.
No, so it was the 3+2. So my first year, I played a total of 11 games. So I didn't really have like the option talk. But you touched on it earlier, like about like signing early. So once I finally broke through, I think it was my third year or fourth year. I don't even remember. Actually, my third year. Yeah, my third year. They had talked about like trying to sign like an extension or something, and I finally broke through, and I was probably kind of like, I don't know if I was petty or like, nah, I finally broke through, so we're gonna run this out. Like
Mm.
I hit all my triggers, so it was gonna be more than if I resigned. So yeah, I was like, maybe if y'all would have played me the first year, we could be talking. But I was more just like, yo, we're gonna ride this thing out. But yeah, I didn't have the option decline talk until like Kansas City, Portland years.
Yeah, where do these conversations happen at Subaru Park, out of curiosity? Are these at the stadium, or is it at the whatever power energy complex, that random brick building in the parking lot?
So I wasn't part of Philly when they had the
Yeah.
luxurious training facility. So we had it in our Subaru Park or PayPal Park. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah,
PPL Park when I was young.
it was, yeah,
Um,
it's changed a few times. PPL, Talon, and now Subaru.
Yeah, PPL and talent. So we had it in the like there's like this back office coach's locker room. I'm not sure if it's still there, but that's where we had it.
Interesting. No, this is all fascinating, and both of you have painted such great pictures. And Tesho, you fleshed out exactly your tweet, but in like 17 better ways, right? Because this is the story that I really wanted to get out there. Because as press and as fans, we don't think about what that morning is like, right? We're just refreshing the hell out of this page to figure out who's coming back and who's not coming back. Never mind rumors and speculation, which I want to ask you guys both about, in terms of what exactly can lead to miscommunication. And the example I'm going to and I know what miscommunication is like for me in my professional world. I'm a professional fundraiser for a college here in Pennsylvania. So I know what miscommunication's like, right? Oh, I didn't send an email, or I forgot to send it, or forgot to mention this, whatever. What is miscommunication when it comes to the example of I think well documented in terms of Alejandro Bedoya, right? What does that miscommunication look like in terms of like, oh, and Jim Curtin has said it, and Ernst Tanner agreed to it in terms of like, we've had some miscommunication with Alejandro Bedoya about whether to bring him back or not. When it's reported by Tom Bogert that the conversation between him and Tanner was all of 30 seconds about, giving him an additional year or two. What does miscommunication look like between an agent, a sporting director, and a coach? So I'll throw it to you, Tesha. Sorry.
This is a tough question. It could look like a whole bunch of different things. I mean, sometimes it's just, maybe like the coach gives a passing comment, like, see you next year kind of thing, and you grab onto that and you think that that's real, but they said it in passing. So like maybe it's just a general misunderstanding. Maybe sometimes things change, like maybe they had all intentions of bringing you back, and then the last couple of years they changed their mind, or vice versa. Like maybe they didn't plan on bringing you back, but then at the end of the year you were balling out, they changed their mind. So some of it could just be, and also another thing is too, I mean, not in the Philadelphia Union sense, but a lot of places, the coaches and the GMs speak a different language than the players, so there could be just actual language differences in terms of expectations. So I think there's a lot of things going on. And the final thing I'll say is that it is a business, like it is literally a business. And I don't know it, like players and fans and a lot of people don't seem to really grasp that at the end of the day, this is a business and the GMs are making business decisions. And if they don't make business decisions, they'll get fired. Like their job is to make business decisions, or the person above them will make a business decision on them, so I think it's really complicated. Every story is different. There could be hours long podcasts about Bedoya's situation, for example, which is much different than anything I've experienced, different than everybody's situation is different. But just the fact that sports is really a business, I think is part of it, and people are treating it as such.
Amobi, any thoughts in terms of what miscommunication looks like when you have these different parties? And Tesha, you sort of touched on it, and something that's very apparent, right? When you have coaches who speak English and sporting directors who like English is like their fifth language, so it's like a very different I don't know, equation, I guess. But Amobi, in your experience, what does that miscommunication look like between all the parties?
For me, I think miscommunication is some people being scared to have tough conversations,
Mm.
whether it's the GM or a coach. So, for example, and not to speak about Bedoya's situation because only Bedoya and the people know about it, but it's like some folks are afraid to have that tough conversation with like a club legend. So respect, because I know Bedoya and I know Coach Jim Person. Jim is someone that is not afraid to have tough conversations and stick up for his players, or speak up when something's he doesn't feel is right. But I feel like sometimes when it comes to communication, people are afraid to have those tough conversations, um, and that's what leads to a lot of miscommunication. Also, like a disconnect between the agent, the play, like too many. What do they say? Too many chefs in the kitchen. Sometimes that's what happens, where the agent may think something versus the player versus the coach versus the GM, and then sometimes everything can happen. And like Tesho said, the president or the owner would be like, let's get rid of him because they finally came to a match and just they want to change things or they want to feel like they want to get involved. So there's so many different factors at play, like you touched on, that even us as players don't see to the player next to us. So, but those are things that come to mind from my vantage point. I think some coaches aren't willing or able, some GMs aren't willing or able to have those tough conversations. And then sometimes there's just a disconnect between all the stakeholders involved.
If I could do a gut check, simple yes or no, or if you want to go further, that's fine. A player, the profile of an Alejandro Bedoya, right? All those years, all those appearances, what he's done, or say this profile player, what that person has done for the city in terms of elevating it, philanthropy, etc. Do you guys subscribe to the notion that at that age they are deserving of a 1 year swan song? Where do you guys stand on that conversation? Because this all spawns off of Pablo Maurer, who writes for The Athletic, who, as soon as he heard about the story in terms of the Bedoya situation, and I hate to be going back to that because I know, Amobi, you mentioned you're friendly with him, but I'm really intrigued. Pablo was under the camp of a player like that. You tell him whatever, but it's got to be reduced, and you're here for 1 more year. We just want to make sure that you only wear these colors. Do you guys subscribe to that notion for a player like a Bedoya, for example, in terms of that length of service and what he's meant for the city? And maybe I'll start with you, Amobi.
Oh, I would start like by this, like Tesho said, sports is a business. So no one is subscribed to it per se. Like no one owes anybody anything. At the end of the day, the only people that are owed something are the fans. And that's, a good experience and ideally a good soccer match to watch. But players come and go, coaches come and go, owners come and go. So GMs come and go. So no one is subscribed to anything. And that's kind of a pet peeve of mine where like players get traded and it's like, oh, how could they do this to me? It's like, it happens. But at the same time, if you want to be a good sports franchise, a good sports culture, if you want to do right by your players, you definitely have to do something because it leaves a bad taste in the club's mouth. I'm very big on like club karma per se. Like if you don't do right by your players, then unfortunately things like happen to the club, in my opinion. And for a player like Bedoya, who's been, if you look at his time with Philadelphia, I think he came in like 2015, 2016. That's been the transformation of Philadelphia Union, along with other players and obviously Jim Curtin as coach. But Bedoya has been the spearhead for that. Yeah, you have to do something. Like he's definitely going to be on like the Ring of Honor or whatever Philadelphia does. Um, you have to do something because you do right by your players, you do right by your team, and it sets a precedent for future players that come. Like we do right by our players. We recognize our players. Not to say who's to say he's going to subscribe to being a swan song, but at least put that on the table, or at least give that option depending on where he's at in his career, and go from there. But no player is subscribed to it. But if you are a club that considers yourself a top club, you hold yourself to a higher standard.
Tesha?
Yeah, I think Moby answered it pretty well. I'll go back to saying sports is a business, and like you said, nobody's kind of really owed anything, and as players you sign up for that. I think, in the case of players like Bedoya who have been at a clubs for a long time, probably what they're owed more than anything is just a conversation as early as possible. I would say that more than anything. I don't know if I would say people are owed a contract or whatever, and I don't even know exactly what happened in his situation, but I think just the earlier you can communicate with somebody who's actually helped propel forward the club, the better, and let them kind of figure out what's the best path forward. But yeah, so I think just a conversation is definitely owed, and then a contract is it is a case by case kind of situation.
Before we move to life after soccer, in a way, as I hate to call you guys outsiders looking in, but you're not under the banner of MLS anymore, right? You're still probably in communication with friends who are former players, etc. But what was it like for you both to sit down and think about the retirement piece? Because you both experienced it way earlier than I will probably have to guaranteed way earlier than I'm going to have to experience it at hopefully 65. Who knows what happens in the future in terms of, what the finances look like and around the world economically. But what was it like for you all to sit down and think about retirement? For some people, my understanding that it's tough, and maybe I'll start with you, Tesha.
Yeah, it's always going to be tough. The good thing is, as an athlete, you're going to retire, whether it's at 25 or 35, like sometime in that age range, you're going to have to find something else. So it's not like it usually catches you completely by surprise. I think what I did really well that's helped my transition is I found other things I was passionate about while I was playing. Like I constantly was either reading books, listening to podcasts, talking to people. I was still going to school while I was playing. And through that, I found the kind of a passion for real estate development and kind of the impact that building better neighborhoods can have on the world. So when I was ready to retire from soccer, I was chasing something instead of like being kicked out the door almost of soccer. Like I was chasing this next opportunity, which if it still feels, I'm a year into it now, and it feels like as smooth of a transition as possible because I went in from doing one thing I really loved and it was amazing for that, my whole life for 9 years professionally. And now, boom, I'm chasing the next dream here in terms of real estate development, building better neighborhoods. So I think just kind of preparing myself mentally, finding that passion while I was still playing was really important for having a smooth transition.
How about you, Amobi?
Yeah, similar to Tesho, I think for me it's sports is the only thing guaranteed to end in divorce. So knowing that, I was at the mindset of, all right, what's going to be next? How can I use sports as a vehicle to find my next passion? And fortunately for, me, and other athletes like Tesho, and there's so many athletes that have done a great job in terms of their transition, is using the platform that sports has provided to find lanes that we're passionate about. So um, the transition is different, obviously, in terms of like the routine and different things like that, identity, all that. But I was fortunate enough to find my second game, as I like to call it. And the difference between this game is that it lasts a lot longer than soccer ever will. So, yeah, I'm very fortunate, and things aren't perfect, but they are right where they need to be.
That's awesome. Tesha, you mentioned, preparing yourself, and Amobi, you sort of alluded to. I think another entity that fans often hear about when it's a dire situation, or maybe it's a situation that's not often positive per se, right? They usually come up as like they had to make a comment, or they had to make a statement, whatever, is that of the MLSPA. How did you guys feel, or does the MLSPA do a good job in preparing all of you for life after soccer? What type of education do they provide? Do they provide any type of, I don't know, counseling or instruction in terms of that, or is that just not their role? Period. I'm not sure exactly. What I would think that's a component, especially when you have literal kids now coming from the academy to becoming professional players. Like people listening would think of the Jack McGlynn's or the Quinn Sullivans of the world who are just barely tipping 20. Tesho, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the PA has lots of resources to help with that, and it's getting more every year. Literally, I don't know, last week me and Amobi were together in Miami at a MLS PA event so there's us, some other former players, but then a bunch of current players too. And it was kind of around this topic, basically like transitioning, preparing, like finding other interests outside of sport, entrepreneurship, all that stuff. So I think they have the resources. Do the players take advantage of the resources? Or do they know all the resources that exist? Not always. So I think maybe from the
Hmm.
PA point of view, they could just continue to just players know what's available. And then for the players, I think um, just, wake up a little bit that it's, you got to start taking advantage of some of these resources before it's too late. So like specifically saying some things that they have that are helpful. One of them is just like connecting you to, they have a network of former players, right? So if I say I'm interested in fashion, I tell the PA that they'll go through their database and say like who in MLS is working in fashion now, and they'll connect you via email to that person. So that right there is a pretty powerful tool because you know somebody who went from your current situation as a player into something you're interested in doing and ask them how they did it. So that's like one very tangible thing that the PA has that all players should take advantage of. And nobody has taken better advantage of the PA resources than Amobi. So I'll let him take the conversation from here.
No, listen, before I turn it over to Amobi, I find parallels between this, and I think of myself with my HR department, just how much shit they offer that I don't take advantage of because I'm a kid, right? Or I'm an adult, but like I don't think about, what is this entity that's there maybe to help me, or entity that's there to like guide me through certain things. thinking of an HR department. So that's an interesting sort of like correlation between the two. But Amobi, tell me, as Tesho mentions, you took good advantage of the MLSPA. Let us know about this.
It's just all about being proactive. Like I think it's a healthy balance, and obviously MLSPA has made great strides with the growth of the league. They're growing as part of it too. But at the same time, you can't force a horse to drink. You can only take him to the water. You can't force him to drink it. So part of it's on the players, and obviously as the league continues to grow and continues to be more diverse, MLSPA is going to have to combat that and find different ways to engage with its player pool. But
I think he cut out.
I think we lost him. We'll circle back with him. And Amobi, if he cut in, we'll make sure to clean it up a little bit. But maybe oh, there you are. Go on.
Oh,
Perfect
I'm
timing. No,
not sure
you're
what
good.
happened.
You disconnected for a second. Go on.
Because like as an athlete, it's all about how you can leverage your platform. We spoke about it earlier. You're only going to be an athlete for so long, so take advantage of it. And then especially in my case, because I left school early, I was really big about making sure I still could pursue my education, and made sure that when I retired, I wasn't just going to be just an athlete, or just a job. So I made sure that executive externships, executive courses, education, resources, stipends, whatever it is, I took advantage of.
That's awesome to hear. I guess maybe to now flip the coin, as folks who are watching from outside looking in, still very passionate about the MLS, I hope, and interested. I think both of you mentioned traveling to different games, LAFC last year, Amobi you mentioned, and Tesho, I think you traveled to watch a Cincinnati game just recently in the playoffs too, if I recall. What do you guys make? Obviously a very different landscape from when you guys were playing. Not that it was really all that long ago, but very different in terms of like the number of games that are being played. Right. When you add all of it, I think the Philadelphia Union clocked in, and producer Todd can maybe correct me on this via the magic phone, 50 plus games. What do you guys make about that quantity of games? And I guess your initial reaction, and maybe we'll start with you, Amobi.
A lot of games. Boys need rest. Boys need rest. That's a lot of games. Yeah, it's a lot of games, and hopefully the players are getting compensated, for it. I know that's a big issue, and like one of the reasons why they are moving away from Open Cup. I don't think that's the real reason, but yeah, it's a lot of games, so it's all about rotating your players better, making sure the health and wellness recovery is better, and I know they do. Every flight's charter, or most flights are charter, if not 90% at least. So that's a game changer. But yeah, I, if the players are getting paid to play a sport they love, so we love playing the games. It's just making sure the precautions and things are in place to compensate them.
Tesho, could you have held it together for 50 plus games? That big
I
frame of
mean,
yours?
The thing is, it's a lot of games, but I mean, the European guys are playing a lot of games too. Like, look up how many games did Man City play last year? They probably played more than that.
And they're
It's a lot
playing
of,
too many as well.
yeah. So it's a lot of games, but look, like what we said, you get paid well to play the sport. I think that the league leaning into making it as easy as possible for players to recover and stay healthy. So like chartering the flights, getting your own hotel room, which in the first couple of years of my career, we had to share hotel rooms, which I wasn't a fan of. That top quality training staff in the facilities, deeper squads, different stuff like that can help with squad rotation. But at the end of the day, it is a lot of games, but it's what we sign up for as well.
Thank you both for sharing that. And as we sort of start wrapping up the conversation, maybe just some quick fire questions here and follow along with me. Your impression when you heard about the amount of money being invested into the league through the Apple deal, what were your initial reactions as well? Because I know what mine was like and what I was expecting. And I've been satisfied, though I don't take advantage of them all in terms of, the viewership angle as a fan, because I'm in the stadium, right? I'm in the press box, or I'm in the stands, and then going into that very small room, Amobi, where they do the press conferences, and then the locker room, which stinks. It smells awful, and the players area, whatever. So I don't get the enhanced viewing. I don't get the enhanced cameras or the enhanced sound or whatever. But your initial reactions of the money that was dumped into the league, and do you feel like, I don't want to say it's a mistake, but like, with the CBA that was negotiated before this amount of money coming in, like, what does that make you feel, right? Like, is this leverage in terms of negotiating again? And obviously the CBAs is basically lawyers talking to lawyers. I get that. So, Tesho, maybe your initial thoughts.
I think the Apple deal is a huge win for MLS, like the money side of it, but then also just being associated with a brand like Apple, I think is huge. So I would say, first of all, it's a big win. And I'm interested to see how they push forward in terms of like controlling the whole narrative of the story of MLS. Like I've heard some rumblings about possibly doing more in-depth stories of like off the field, insider look, like Hard Knocks type, stuff, whatever it could be, different stuff like telling stories of players a little bit better. I think now that they have kind of in-house production, MLS does doing all this stuff. Hopefully they can produce more of these stories and add to the entertainment that is the league. And so I think like, you love Philadelphia Union from a soccer perspective, but you and all your friends also love just like the drama and the story of the Union, and I think that if the league can do a better job of playing up and telling that story like at a better, deeper level, I think the fans' attachment to the game is just gonna grow. And I think Apple will help them do that.
Amobi, I know you got to hop soon. If you want to answer this one before you jump off, and I can just ask Tesha one or two more questions yet.
All right, most definitely. Yeah, I think it's great for the league in terms of Apple being attached with MLS. Obviously, we see the change in how sports media is being covered. Apple and Amazon kind of leading the way with this new regime of what's going on. Um, Apple, I think, definitely wins because they have it under their umbrella and they kind of control the the flow per se and kind of force you to get on their platform. Not everyone may be an Apple fan or able to get on Apple, but you know, you win some, you lose some. There's never a negotiation where both sides win everything. So I think it's a win on all parts. Definitely want to see more storylines being told from an outside, from an off live match experience perspective. Um, if the money goes back to the players and to the growth of the league, I'm all for it. I think definitely with the way the upcoming CBA is coming, and now understanding the numbers, the conversations are going to be interesting next CBA go around. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And I'm happy I'm not going to be in those rooms as a player representative anymore. I can just tweet from the outside. All I ask is that the players work on getting us pensions, but that's it. But other than that, I think it's good.
Interesting. Yeah, no, 2028, I think, is when this one runs through. And then I guess hopefully negotiations or conversations are happening well before that. And Amobi, if you got to go, by all means, just hop on. Hop off, I should say. That's totally fine. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Tesho. Appreciate you setting it up, man.
For sure.
Amobi, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I could go hours asking this man questions, especially about the Freddie Do experiment back when he was a player.
maybe round two, but I'll catch you later.
All right. Thank you, Amobi.
All right. Bye.
All right, Tasha. I was sort of alluding to it with the Freddie Adu experiment in terms of what designated players are like. And obviously you had your fair share of sharing a locker room with designated players. Dom Dwyer, I think Mauricio Pereira was one of them too, and obviously the highest profile one being Nani. If you don't want to comment, that's totally fine. I'm intrigued though. What is the dynamic like in that locker room with these guys when you have both ends of the scale there, right? You have the DP players raking in what they're raking in, some for good reason, some it's sort of like, ticket sales, which, whatever, that's a reason. But then you have the college draftee, and I go back to like, the Holden Trent, who's a goalkeeper who was picked up last draft by the Philadelphia Union, who's cracking 60K a year, right? So like what are those dynamics like? If I don't even know if I'm asking it right, but just off the top of my head, I'd love to hear what that's like.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, all the DPs I've played with have been great people. They love soccer like that, and they're good at soccer. Like that's why all of them are getting paid so much money. So I've had a lot of good experience with DPs. It is a funny dynamic in MLS with just such a mismatch in player salaries, versus let's say the Mexican League, where there's a
Hmm.
lot of people making whatever, like $700,000 instead of in MLS, people can make more than they do in Mexico, but they also make much less. And Mexico's kind of taken the middle route for everybody. Uh, I think MLS is trending in that direction of kind of more similar salaries. So we'll see. But I think that they did it for a reason. Like it allows some flexibility with teams. Like to bring in a player like Messi it's just interesting. So there's pros and cons to it. I would say also like another kind of interesting thing with DPs is Mauricio is an amazing player. Mauricio Pereira, who I played with, amazing player. And I played with him at the same time as Nani. So they were both DPs at the same time. But Nani was a different level of famous than anybody else I played with. And so it was just interesting being around someone like him, who I had been around DPs my whole career, who were making lots of money, but they weren't necessarily like worldwide famous versus Nani. Every city we go to,
Hmm.
everybody wants a piece of this guy. So people like him, and then Messi is another level even of fame from that. So I think it's interesting as you see some of these bigger name guys come in, and just the type of media attention and fanfare that goes around with them moving around the country and stuff is an interesting dynamic to add. And then you got a college draftee like sitting next to them on the bus, but it's fun. It's a good time.
Obviously, everybody's different in terms of potential animosity, right? You're a player who's maybe playing more minutes than this DP who's injured or whatever, but it sounds like there's a way to work around it, and I think it, as you mentioned earlier, it really just comes down to communication. But to your point of notoriety in terms of the difference between a Pereira or Nani, right? Nani Nani gets you free bottle service. Pereira not so much when you should roll up to the club with him. So that's fascinating. And I guess to wrap up, and then maybe this is a deeper question than it needs to be, but if you could go back, is there anything you would want to change about your playing career?
Honestly, no. I think I had such an amazing experience for a number of reasons. Like, first, like I was telling my story earlier, came from D2. I didn't even think I was going to go professional initially. Then I get drafted, and I'm like, man, if I play for 3 years, it's amazing. Ended up playing for 9. So a lot of that felt like house money. And
Mm,
I got to play for Canada, which was amazing. I represented the country I was born in. I played in the Gold Cup. I played in World Cup qualifiers with Canada. It was amazing. We went to Central America. I've been to every country in Central America. How many people can say that all through soccer? So I traveled like I can go on and on. My experience through playing was amazing. I wouldn't have changed a thing. I think I was so lucky to have that opportunity. Um, yeah. Let me actually say one funny, interesting thing is I grew up, we were saying I grew up playing before the academy times, right? And I used to play multiple sports. We used to only practice like 3 times a day or something. And so I really think I came in the league at a sweet spot because when I came in the league, I wasn't making amazing money, but I was making good money, like I was making good money my whole career, kind of rode that wave of salaries up versus if I came in 5 years earlier, those guys are making $12,000 a year. So I came in late enough to make good money, but also, man, my last year in Orlando, or even the last couple of years, I'm seeing some of these 16-year-old kids come through that are just unbelievable players. Like so
hmm
the quality is getting so much better. It's been wild to watch. And the reason is because it's so professionalized now. Like these kids by the time they're like professional setting from the time they're 10, by the time they're 15 or whatever, 14, they don't even go to a normal high school anymore. Like none of the kids, I don't know if fans know this, like none of the kids anymore are going to high school that play in the academy at all. They're going to like special schools, they're training professionally multiple times a day. It's a whole different level of thing. And there's some sacrifice to get that quality of player where it works out really well for the guys who come through that system and pop out on top. And they get great money and great careers, all that stuff. But then there's a lot of people who they give up the normal high school experience, they give up the playing other sports, they give up all these things, and then you don't make it pro. So, there's pros and cons to the system. I really think I came in at a sweet spot where I made a good amount of money, but I didn't have to. I also got a really cool life before soccer too, which I think helped me be well-rounded enough to have a good life after soccer.
And not everybody's able to say that, right? That
Yeah.
they had a good life before soccer, or some people, and more often than not, you hear of stories. I think there were a couple of folks in the draft today, and it makes you emotional every single time I hear it, right? People who are like clawing for life, whether it's outside of being in prison or hunger or whatever, that soccer's the way that they made it, right? To stay away from those things. And that's not always the case. Favorite jersey that you have that you exchanged with somebody in your playing time, and jersey you wish you would have exchanged with somebody to have during your playing time?
The one I wish is Thierry Henry because my favorite player my whole life, I shaped my look after him. Here I am, bald with my beard. So, no, but I love Thierry. I love Thierry Henry. He's the best. And my first year in the league was his last year in the league. We played Red Bulls at home in Dallas, but right after the game, he ran off the field. So I don't fanboy really off of any player, but Henry is the one guy that I loved the most watching growing up. So I wish I could have traded with him. And then my favorite that I did trade, I think it was nice when I left Dallas was the first time that I started really, I had been in the league 5 years and I started playing against a lot of people who I was actually knew and was friends with. So like one of my really good friends that came to Dallas the same time as me, Ryan Hollingshead, the first time I played against him and we traded jerseys, like that was a good feeling for me. And I had that experience with multiple other guys like Chris Seitz, Victor Ulloa, guys who I played with for years and years, and then we went our separate ways, but then we're kind of reunited on the field. I loved those experiences.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to thank you. And I know Amobi left, and obviously he shared so much knowledge as someone who is much like yourself, successful and enterprising and entrepreneurial, and in terms of wanting to excel outside of soccer, which obviously doesn't start after, it starts in the middle of it. So you're proactive and getting started for that second win, right? Or that second game, as Amobi put it so nicely. But I just want to thank you so much for taking time to share some of these experiences, which at the time weren't easy, I'm sure. But now educating people, because I'm being very sincere when I say that I don't think that the average MLS fan is really cognizant of what goes into a lot of this business that they go and enjoy every single Saturday at 7:30 or 7:30 every single Saturday, ever since Apple, or like the random Sunday game. That they just don't realize it, right? They're just names with people with jerseys that they fanboy about, but then when it comes to the hard part, they tune out, or they just don't think about it. So I'm
I
so
also think
thankful for your
nobody's telling
time.
that story. Like a lot of people for a variety of reasons are not shedding light on that. And I think it's changing. I think players are now starting to use their platform a little bit differently to showcase themselves, which I encourage. Like more, lean into that. Tell the people who you are. I think the league and the teams need to tell the stories of the players, and then the fans can ask too. Ask people questions. But you hear a little bit about something from somebody, dive into it deeper. So I think everybody can kind of play a part into just telling the story of what's going on. And another thing is too, the players don't have any idea what's going on from the fan perspective. They don't,
Mm.
like, you guys are, like everything that goes into creating the TIFO or like the meetings that the supporters groups are having, players have no idea. So maybe there could be some education both ways in that.
No, that's fascinating. I didn't even think about that, because me moving from a fan to doing more of press stuff and being involved that way. And sure, like I will always say it, and whether it's me being transparent or maybe tiptoeing the line. I'm fan first, press second. Will always be honest. If anything, I think I'm probably one of the better ones in terms of being critical but fair in terms of the team that I appreciate and support and have grown up with in a way too. Um, but that's interesting that maybe the players don't even engage or understand what the hell is going on behind the scenes, because they just don't have the access or interested in getting the accents, or maybe the league sort of cuts off the access, right, in terms of PR departments, et cetera, and making sure that those lines are not blurred too much, because mixing those can probably sometimes go bad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think it'd be interesting for players to have an idea of, like, like the last year of my career, I spent a lot of time, I was doing like Twitter Space and stuff, and I was connecting with fans a lot, and I got to know people, as people, which was really cool. Instead of, usually your experience as a player is the fans are like one big mob of people, it's not like a bunch of individuals. So my last year, I actually spent a decent amount of time talking to individuals and getting to like hear their stories, and it was powerful for me, and I think they enjoyed getting to know me. So it was a good experience, I think, both ways.
Probably super cathartic for you in a way, right? These masses of people who are out there screaming under the sun, rain, or, well, maybe not so much snow out in Orlando, but out there just
And then you
screaming
see
for
their
you.
face at the game, like usually you'd see like, oh, that guy, like I know that guy right there, and that's a cool experience.
That's awesome. Well, Tesho, thank you so much for your time. I'll retroactively again say thank you so much to Amobi for his time. He had to jet out early. Be on the lookout, folks listening. Be on the lookout. We have some other cool conversations, one specifically coming up, and maybe Tesho, you and Amobi can be great folks to selfishly help me connect with some other players in terms of diving deep into what press, the role of press back in MLS 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and maybe what it is now, to really inform people of just in this short time, 20 some years of the league, how it's honestly skyrocketed. So be on the lookout for that. Some more cool stuff coming on my end. But for now, thank you, everybody. Have a great night, and appreciate you all.
Thanks for having me.